Hello and welcome. I am Ben the Best 5 and I'm coming at you with yet more Kerbal Space Program content. And today on our mission we are in fact sending a rover and a lander with some science all the way to Duna, because this mission we have is in fact to land on Duna. However, not just land on Duna, but to collect specific pressure measurements from a whole series of different locations all across Duna's surface. And to do that, we in fact need to walk around Duna's surface with, or fly around or whatever, with some way of measuring the pressure and sending the data back. So as a result, we are sending up a lander which contains a rover, which it can then deploy, and the rover itself can then go ahead and rove around the place and drive itself to the required destinations, and then land and give us all the data points we need, and then mission successful. And you can see here the vehicle we are flying today is my D-class vehicle, and this is actually the 1.2 version. The 1.2 version, I changed the upper stage so it's got less parachutes and no drogue chutes and stuff like that, because that's far more efficient when it comes to recovering, because parachutes were in fact the main cost of the actual missions. Anyway, here's a recovery of my lower stage here. It's pretty straightforward basically, although this one is going to land quite a long way from the thing, just because our payload was a lot lighter than what this can carry. But my next largest rocket, smallest rocket, the C-class, couldn't support it, so we had to do quite a lot of slowdown burns, but we had tons of fuel left over because our payload was rather light. So we in fact had no problems returning our booster back down to the ground for a recovery at 72% value, which saved us, well, more than half of the total value of the actual mission. Now, spoiler alert, this rocket here can recover the upper stage if you do it right, but I kind of messed it up. I messed up my mission. So I just showed you there we were at a Duna transfer window, so Duna is at 45 degrees to Kerbin, and that's where you kind of got to be. And as you can see here, just by burning on the side of Kerbin, which will take us closer to Duna, we're already pretty close, so just by performing a couple of fine adjustments we can get an encounter, and we can just edit our encounter so that we're roughly on the right side of Duna to land on, that we can land on so that we can deploy our rover, and so that our rover can be on the correct side of our or the correct side of Duna, or the right spot on Duna for our place that we want to measure the pressure from. The mission was very specifically pressure, and also the spot that the 4 spots that they want us to measure are in fact all on the north pole of Duna. So we want to, just flying from Kerbin, we want to just get as close to Duna as possible, and then further along on our trip we'll just perform some mid-course corrections to send us on our way towards Duna. Now I could have in fact now I had lots of leftover delta V, and what the original plan for this was is I would start my burn with the upper stage and then detach it, and then do the rest of my injection burn using the actual lander itself, land the upper stage, and then send the lander to Duna, obviously, and do all that cool stuff. However, I in fact just did the entirety of the injection burn there with the upper stage and didn't bother trying to recover it, because when I was messing around and experimenting, I discovered that I couldn't actually detach the heat shield and the stack decoupler. So I had a stack decoupler there between the upper stage and the lander. However, for some reason, when I detached the stack decoupler during my testing, it was still stuck to the heat shield. So the two heat shields were kind of stuck together around the stack decoupler, and the only way that I could actually find a way to decouple the lander from the upper stage was by detaching the heat shield on the upper stage. However, detaching the heat shield on the upper stage meant that there was no way I was going to be able to recover the upper stage of the rocket, so I figured, well, if I've got a rocket that's kind of useless, or kind of can't land, then I might as well use up as much of its fuel as feasible. Now at this stage, although it does have a little bit of fuel left over in it, I opted to not use any of that fuel because I wanted to be quite precise, and that engine it's not delicate enough to do the precise stuff. And as you can see here, I'm demonstrating the kind of error I had, issues, I guess you could say, with the heat shields. As you can see, they're not kind of together, but they are together, and they're kind of wobbling because of the heat shield. But as soon as I detached that heat shield, everything fell apart, and the lander was capable of doing its thing. Now just me seeing if I could remove the shroud, because that kind of looks a bit ugly, but I couldn't, but that doesn't matter. Anyway, our lander is flying free through space, and we're going to go to our first point. Now, something I hadn't counted on was the fact that that rather rapid decoupling with the stack separator kind of floating around and stuff, that actually built up a little bit of energy inside my rocket. So when it all got released by detaching the heat shield, it actually resulted in the heat shield, the rocket getting bumped, so my course was no longer actually at a Duna intersect. So I had to quite rapidly alter my intersect node, so that we actually ended up, well, I executed it just because I figured that was probably a good idea, just because it would put us where we were expecting, kind of. It would have performed the adjustment, but just in the wrong spot, in a sense, so I still executed it anyway, and now I'm just performing another correction burn. I performed quite a few correction burns just because I tried to land quite close, and well, I ended up landing about 15 to 10 kilometers, spoiler alert, from the actual target, so it was quite a long rover ride, rover drive, I guess. But yes, spoiler alert, we do in fact end up landing safely, doing some science with the lander because I brought that down, added some science to it anyway, because I figured why not. Also, I am kind of leaving a lot of this stuff uncut. Like for example, normally I would cut out the time warps, however, I'm just leaving them in because it's my first Duna mission for the series, so I'm just kind of like showing all the steps just in case you do want to use this as a reference point, or as some kind of a tutorial, or you want to repeat my missions, or you basically, first Duna mission, I'm leaving it kind of really, like, yeah, just really not cutting stuff out that I normally would, just for the sake of the viewer. Yes. So I figured, since I've got lots of fuel, I could in fact just start making my maneuvers inside the sphere of influence of Duna, which is a lot more fuel consuming, but since the stage has lots of fuel left in it, I figured I might as well, just for a better result. Also, I would like to make a little comment about this rover and lander setup. As you can see there, we have a rather large lander with a rather small rover inside it. It's rather similar actually to the Sojourner rover, which ended up landing on Mars during the 90s, and it's in fact a rover that not many people are aware existed, but the Sojourner rover existed. And it was actually very, very similar in size and shape. It had 3 wheels like mine does. It was the same dimensions. Yeah, I think that's kind of cool, that's all. That, my first, well, for this save, the first lander rover setup thing I have going is basically the same as the first one that happened in real life. Also, the first one that happened on Mars, which is kind of the equivalent of Duna, it landed on one of Mars's poles as well. However, it landed on the South Pole, whereas this lander rover setup is in fact landing on the North Pole of Duna. Anyway, while I was talking about that, you can see I have set up an encounter to more or less get us kind of on the right spot, and when I'm a bit closer to Duna again, I just perform another adjustment burn to bring us kind of as close to the landing sites as I thought I possibly could, but I in the end do in fact end up undershooting the landing site, so I should have left my landing to be a bit more I should have aimed to have my target point from orbit to be further along than I did, basically just because the effects of air resistance on and how well it helped to lower my craft and its I guess you'd say virtual apoapsis was a lot greater than I suspected, which meant the craft did end up falling short. So in the future, if you're doing this mission, or even for myself when I'm trying a mission of similar scale again, I'll in fact make sure that my craft hits Juna's atmosphere a bit shallower, so it's got more, so it lands in a different spot, so that we can get nice and close and land nice and close to target. Because, well, although I have a massive antenna on this thing, it's not really a problem communicating. It's just can be a bit time consuming to drive several kilometers just to do some stuff. But hey, I ended up doing it, but I cut most of it out, just showed you guys a couple of random highlights because I figured you didn't want to see the full few hours worth of driving. Also, the lander serves a secondary purpose apart from actually landing the craft. As you can see there, it has a large antenna on it, and that is actually what communicates to the rover while it's busy roving about and moving, because the rover itself, it does for because it needs an antenna on it to transmit science, and we need to transmit the science back to Kerbin. It does have some an antenna, but it's clipped in, and it's a deployable one. It's the big deployable one, which is like an umbrella. It's that one, and we can't really have it out while we're actually driving, so that antenna there provides it with the ability to actually contact the Kerbal Space Center and move around when that antenna is not deployed. Also, normally you wouldn't really need to use drogue chutes. However, we're using parachutes on Duna because that reduces the requirements. However, because Duna's atmosphere is rather interesting, drogue chutes are a must. You need to have drogue chutes in order to slow down your craft fast enough to actually land the craft, because on this planet, parachutes deploy rather slowly, so that's why you need them. And you'll notice there that I had to use my engines there just to quickly slow down my craft for landing. I don't know if you saw that, but I did have to do that. And as you can see here, I'm deploying my rover, and it rolls out and does a pretty cool flip. Like actually kind of cool. There we go. And it can do that because low gravity means you don't sustain much damage while doing cool flips like that. Yes, although don't recommend it. Also, you'll see on the lander how I use the solar panels that can be deployed in and out. Usually, if I don't have to use those, I will in fact use the solar panels which only deploy once because they are cheaper and way less. However, I needed to tuck them in for the landing or else they'd burn up. So, as a result, that's what I did. Anyway, you can see me doing some science on the lander because, well, I was sending a lander, so I figured I might as well do a little bit of science. And here we go. That's me just checking which direction I need to drive in, and I basically need to drive towards the sun. So that's what I'm doing. And here you can see the rover going off on its very brave adventure, off to go do some pressure things. And here now are just some random, I guess you could say, highlights of just real-time footage of a rover driving through Duna's icy deserts on its north pole. Yeah, I know. I really think that Duna's landscape, especially up here on the North Pole, is quite good. It's quite well done, especially after the revamp it got just a couple of updates ago, and I think it's really looking quite impressive. So here I'm just showing some of its landscape, as well as how I basically made sure I was going in the right direction. I opened up the map screen, saw where the sun was, and tried to see if I could find any noticeable landmarks, and I followed them. So yes, this is some lovely shots of a rover driving through Duna. Obviously I didn't show you the whole thing. In fact, my nice cinematic shots of the rover will finish in a couple of seconds, and I didn't bother including stuff like, sending up science and whatever. So yes, here we are with our rover parked nicely after going and collecting the data from all of the points that need to and completing the mission successfully. I would like to thank you very much for watching. Yes, thank you for watching, and if you like my content, please leave a like. If you want to tell me something, then comment. Also, please subscribe. Subscribing is great, it helps me out a lot. And yeah, thank you for watching. I'd like to also say that next episode there will be a vote as to whether I go to Gilly or Duna again, so let me know in the comments which one.